Hi everybody! For the last few weeks my weekly catch-up has been focused on all of the new things happening at Bobbins and Buttons. So I've got my new beginners digital sewing course coming out very soon. I've also got new sewing kits, so I've got 2 sewing kits already released and I've got 2 new ones coming next week. And then there are events. In fact, today is our last social of this year, and it's also our last social on a Sunday. We will be hosting the social again next year, but next year it will be on a Saturday. So aside from that, I've also been running my regular weekly sewing classes, of which there are at least 5. And at the moment I've got lots of customers working with jersey fabrics. So I thought today I'd talk a little bit about working with jersey fabrics, and I've also got some examples to show you and talk through. Lots of people can be quite frightened of working with jersey fabrics. I think they think there's an unpredictability to the stretch, but actually there's lots of really big advantages to making jersey garments. So one great thing about making jersey garments is the fit. And when you're making woven clothes, you haven't got much forgiveness because the fabric doesn't move. But with a stretch fabric, there is a little bit of an element. You still need to get the right size, but you've probably got a little bit more leeway to if you haven't quite got the right fit, and you probably can get away with it a little bit more easily than if you're using woven fabric or making a woven garment. Another thing is speed. If you like making quick garments, often jersey garments are the quickest to make. A little t-shirt, something like that, can be made in quite a short space of time. And another big thing that's very exciting about working with jersey garments is using the overlocker. So I tend to find that most customers, once they've had a go on an overlocker, they are completely hooked. And using an overlocker is the ideal way to sew many jersey garments together, because what you need when you're sewing a jersey garment is a seam that will stretch along with the fabric, and the overlocker automatically does that. As it sews, your seam will also be stretchy. So these are really great reasons to make jersey garments, but there are some considerations that are important to think about, and that can mean that things can go slightly pear-shaped if they're not quite right. So one of these is percentage of stretch. So basically, percentage of stretch is how much the fabric stretches. So if I just hold this bolt of fabric to give you an example, the way to test it, and I do actually have a blog post on my website with this and the little kind of measure guide on there, but basically you want to hold your fabric relaxed and then stretch it to see how far it stretches. So you can measure this with a ruler, or often you'll find on a pattern that you've got a gauge to stretch your fabric to. So if you hold your fabric relaxed to the arrow and then you stretch it to the other arrowhead on the pattern, that will tell you whether you've got enough stretch in your fabric to make that pattern. And this is important because if your pattern is designed to have a lot of stretch and you try and make your garment with something that doesn't have quite enough, then you're going to find that it feels too restricted, and maybe you can't even get the garment on. So percentage of stretch is definitely worth investigating. But like I said, many patterns will already have a bit of a guide on the pattern envelope somewhere, and it definitely should say, if stretch is important to your pattern, it should say in the pattern. And secondly, ease. So we probably know a bit more about ease when it comes to woven garments, because you'll see a garment, a body measurement, and then you'll see the actual garment size. So the difference between the two is the amount of ease in the design. and this is usually based on sort of designers' preference, but it can also be subjective. It can be down to your personal taste. But on the whole, with a woven garment, you want your garment measurements to be above your body measurements. But with jersey garments, this can be different. It can be negative ease. So it might mean that your garment needs to be very fitted. If your garment's very fitted, it's going to be smaller than your body size. So in this case, it's called negative ease. And then the last thing that is important to consider with making jersey garments is how you sew it together. So not everybody's got an overlocker, and if you haven't got an overlocker, you still absolutely can make jersey garments, but you would need to use a jersey or a ballpoint needle in your sewing machine, and you'd also need to use a stretch stitch of some sort. So there's various types. I tend to prefer to use a shallow zigzag stitch, because if you do need to unpick it, that's not too painful to unpick. Some of the other options are really difficult to unpick. So a shallow zigzag stitch, you'll find if you test it out on a little piece of scrap that you can actually just pull the seam enough to give it a little bit of ease. So if you imagine pulling on a t-shirt, and as it goes over your head, the kind of armhole catches or something. If it's a straight stitch, it's likely to break the stitches and you'll create a hole. Whereas if you've got that little bit of ease, it'll just stretch on with the garment, and you'll be fine and you can carry on wearing it. So those are three key areas that I think are important when you're sewing jersey garments. But the one thing that happened this week, well, I started last week actually, was Rachel, who comes to one of my classes. She'd bought a new pattern, and looking at the front of the cover of the pattern, it looked like a classic jacket, a kind of semi-tailored jacket, quite fitted, neat, boxy sort of shape. And she'd bought some really lovely sort of woolen classic coating fabric to make it in. And she just wanted to go through the sizes and she was going to cut it out at home, when I spotted the pattern said stretch on the actual pattern. So this was the first time we'd actually realised this, and so it meant that she couldn't really use that pattern for the fabric that she'd chosen, because basically the pattern was clearly designed for some level of stretch. And looking at the design, you could see that the fitted nature of the jacket would mean that she probably wouldn't get it on. She probably would get it on, but it would feel really uncomfortable and tight to move in. So she went away and she managed to find some new fabric, and disaster averted, so it was okay. But then this week she came back with the new fabric with the right amount of percentage of stretch, and everything was fine. But she chose another pattern for the fabric that she'd originally hoped to make the jacket in, and her husband asked her, why can you make this jacket and not this jacket? And I just thought that was a really interesting question actually, because it would seem like a really strange thing, but the point is that the designer had anticipated that amount of stretch when they designed that pattern. So if you don't have that amount of stretch, it is all about it not fitting properly. It's not to say it could never be made, but we would have had to make a toile, make sure that we'd have definitely had to size up, and we'd have had to make a toile to make sure it was comfortable and did fit, because the style of the jacket did certainly look like it could be made in a woven, but it's the initial stages of making that pattern that have been are affecting how you move forward with it. So I just thought it was actually quite an interesting thing to think about. And so I thought I would show you some examples now of patterns that I've got in my range, and just talk about the percentage of stretch and some of these other things that I've just mentioned. And also some of these are patterns that my customers are making, and also patterns that I kind of are my regular go-to. So for a start off, Today I'm wearing the Yvonne Coatigan, and I've also layered that up because it's so cold with an Angie t-shirt underneath. So I'll just start with those two. So the Yvonne Coatigan is designed to be stretch, but this could be made and has been made in a woven fabric. So the one thing, in fact, the last person to make this, I think, was well, in a woven fabric, was Claire. And what we did with her fabric was we chose the same size that would fit her as a regular size in the stretch. But what we did was we made the arms a bit deeper, because this is the narrowest part and this is the part that would be uncomfortable. So at the moment I'm wearing this with 2 other layers underneath, and because it's stretchy, it's absolutely fine, it's very comfortable. But if I had this in a woven fabric, then I think this would feel quite restrictive and tight and uncomfortable. So we compensated on the pattern just by making the arms wider and deepening the armhole. The rest of the body fit on the Yvonne Coatigan is very loose, so there's no reason why that needs to be in anything stretchy. It can just be in a regular woven fabric. So that's how I would treat this, and I designed it initially to be made in something like this. In fact, this is the one that's featured in the instructions. It's been made in lots of different fabrics, but just to give you a bit of a fabric choice for today, I've picked this jacquard, which is a nice medium to heavy weight fabric, lovely organic cotton from Mind the Maker, I think that one is. Yeah. So this is the type of fabric that I envisaged when I designed this this shape to be made in. But like I said, it does work in other things, but those are the considerations that I would have if I was making it in a woven. It can also be made in a heavier weight jersey. Again, that's the sort of thing I would look at. This is the area that's going to be restricted if it's not stretchy enough. And then I mentioned the Angie, which is my go-to t-shirt pattern. So often I make the Angie t-shirt in a regular cotton jersey, but in the case of a layering garment like I'm wearing today, I quite often like the bamboo or the modal or the tencel jerseys, which are much softer and almost more like underwear in weight. So I really like the Angie pattern from that point of view, that you can make it across the board. So like I said, today I'm wearing it in the capacity of keeping me warm because it's so cold. So I've got a light pointelle version, and this would also work. And one thing I would consider, if you want to wear it as an undergarment, you might want to downsize the pattern a little bit so it's very fitted, so it's almost like a skin tight layer to keep you warm. And your regular Angie top as a t-shirt, I would make in something like this, which is a classic cotton elastane jersey, and then I would wear this under a pinafore dress or just with jeans, you know, just as a regular t-shirt shape. So again, both would work. We're looking at the different amount of stretches and the different handles to choose how you make it. And then a lot of my customers at the moment are making sweatshirts. The great thing about the sweatshirt is that it can be made entirely on the overlocker, so if you really need an overlocker fix, the sweatshirt patterns are ideal. So I've got 3 sweatshirt patterns. I've got the Lynn for ladies fit, Dean for men's fit, and Theodore for kids fit. And I actually specifically designed that to be a follow-on from my overlocker class, so something people could make once they'd been to my overlocker know-how class. So that is actually scheduled for next year. The first one I believe is already fully booked, but there's a second class in February, and and that follows with a new overlocker class that I've actually just introduced in March next year, which is a full day. So this is an opportunity to bring your overlocker, get to grips with all of its functionality again, and make a sweatshirt. So the day includes one of my sweatshirt patterns, and we'll spend a lot of time doing lots of overlocking things. So I've got quite a few different fabrics, and these dead stock bright prints are really fun, I think, for kids sweatshirts. So I've got a few of those, and people are currently making sweatshirts as gifts for sort of Christmas presents. And this is another classic combination to have a matching rib and the organic sweatshirt. So at the moment Julie is making her grown son a lovely khaki green version, which I think is going to look lovely. And this is, there's not too much emphasis on stretch on the actual sweatshirt fabric. In fact, I think there's quite minimal. I think it's about 20% stretch needed on the actual body, but what you need is 100% stretch for the neckband and the hemband and the cuffs. So hence the rib fabrics, which always has 100% stretch. So sweatshirts are really versatile. You can make them in plain fabrics as your everyday kind of, you know, casual wear, or you can make some fun ones. I've just pulled this one out too because this is my favourite at the moment. So this one's slightly lighter, so this could be more of a sort of top weight. So in actual fact I'm making a couple of lighter ones, and again I'm downsizing the pattern because I want a slightly more fitted garment, but I'm just keeping an eye on that percentage of stretch, because if I downsize to a smaller size than I would regularly wear, I need to have that extra stretch to mean the fit's going to be the right size. So that one's a slightly lighter one. And then I was talking earlier about negative ease, so I just want to show you the violet leggings. So this is a classic pair of leggings, if you can see that, and there's a few different options on this. So mainly there's panelled and pockets and various different things, but this is a pattern with negative ease, so it means that the pattern is smaller than your body to get that tight fit. And again, the percentage of stretch is important, but this is classically made in things like these sportswear fabrics. So I've got quite a few sportswear fabrics in stock. I've got these lovely recycled nylon and recycled plastic bottle fabric